So this next story, this is about dating, about making choices, making decisions, where you're trying to find the one, where you're making choices, you're making decisions, you're trying to figure out, is this where I find the magic? Is this gonna be the one? So I was 23 years old, and for the first time in my life, I'd moved in with a girlfriend. For legal reasons, let's call her Kate. So Kate and I had moved in together. We'd gotten an apartment in Southeast Portland. Now at the time, I was working as a cook at this high-end downtown restaurant, one of those exposed kitchens so people can see you working, one of those kind of kitchens. And Kate, she was a bit of a hippie, studied naturopathic medicine in college. She had a trunk full of tinctures. But at the time, she worked as a nanny for this rich couple over in Northwest Portland. So the first few months of living together, things are going great, absolutely great. I'm enjoying it. I'm like, yeah, I'm living with a woman. This is working out. I like this. And then I come home from work one evening, like 3 months into it or so, and I walk into the apartment. And when I walk in, it's like 10 o'clock in the evening or so, and I walk in. When I walk inside, there's a chair in the middle of the living room, strategically placed. And I look over and she's sitting at the kitchen table and she's staring at me and she says, sit down. I'm like, okay. So I go over and I sit down and I'm trying to figure out like what I had done wrong. I'm racking my brain. Like I can't think of anything that I've done wrong. And she says, so Thatcher, and she waits for a response. Now Thatcher was a character that I used in my journal. I used to write in my journal about things that had happened to me, all the crazy shit that happens in this life, but I wrote about it in third person. Give myself a little bit of distance, a way to create that distance so I could help make sense of things. And I'm saying, and I look at her and I'm like, hey, that's my journal. What are you doing reading my journal? That's private. But she does not really care about that because she is not happy with some of the things that Thatcher had done. Now, I didn't write chronologically. I didn't write what happened yesterday or anything like that. So the things, they were out of order. So she says to me, so you like cheating on me, Thatcher? You like cheating on me? Is that what you like? And I'm like, oh my God. I was like, hey, that's my journal. That's private. But she's not interested in that. And she stands up and she says, so Thatcher, you like fucking girls with multiple personalities? Is that what you like, Thatcher? Is that what you like? And she runs at me. I'm sitting in the chair like this. She runs at me, knocks me back on my chair onto the floor, and she's on top of me, and she is going to Pound Town, but not the good kind of Pound Town. So this is where the story gets a little weird. So she's on top of me, and her fists are just raining down on me. But this night that she is referencing, this journal entry, it was so traumatic. It was such a weird night for me that I can't help it. I have a little PTSD flashback. So this journal entry that she is referencing, it happened when I was 22, before I'd even met Kate. So I was at a bar one evening, of course, and I'd met this woman at a bar, extremely attractive, and she was talking to me, and I was like, this is great, and I'm talking to her, but my spidey senses were up, because, she was just a little off. I would ask her questions like, where are you from? She's like, I'm from Quebec, but I'm from here now. Little things like that. I'm like, okay, it's a little weird, but when you're 22 and you're drinking, you know what I mean? You let things slide. And she said a bunch of other strange things, but, I just kind of let it slide. So when she invited me home, of course I said yes. So we walked the 10, 12 blocks back to her place, and we get back to her place, and we get in front of the house, and she stops me, and she's like, hey. She's like, I know it's a little awkward, but I still live with my mom. Like, we have to be super quiet. We can't wake her up. It'll just ruin everything. We can't wake her up. I was like, okay. You know, it reminded me of like being back in high school. I thought it would be, it's like sneaking in. Made it more exciting. So we sneak into the house. She quietly opens the front door and we tiptoe upstairs. And we get to a bedroom on the far back of the house, and she quietly opens the the bedroom door, and she quietly closes the bedroom door behind her. And then she's standing there in front of me. It's dark, but the room is slightly illuminated. There's a little street lamp, there's a little street light coming in from a street lamp. And she's standing 5-6 feet away from me. And then she just takes off all of her clothes, gets fully naked in front of me. And internally, I'm like, yes. Yes, I'm really excited about that. And then she goes over and she climbs into the bed. So, I assume that that's an invitation. I think most people would assume that that's an invitation. So I take off all my clothes, and I climb into the bed next to her. And she's laying there with her back kind of facing toward me. She's facing the wall. And I go in for a little spoon action, and I put my hand on her thigh and gently stroke her thigh, and then I hear, "Don't touch me." So I roll back over, and I'm laying there looking up at the ceiling like, did I just hear a demonic voice? Did I just hear a demonic voice? I'm like, no. It's like, and I start replaying things. I'm like, okay, she got naked in front of me. She climbed into the bed. Like, I'm not prone to auditory hallucinations or anything. So I'm laying there. I'm trying to figure out, Remember, I'm 22. I've had a few beers, and I just want to make sure that I hadn't invented everything, just to be sure. And I make the mistake. I roll back over, and I put my hand on her thigh again, just to be sure. Big mistake. Because as soon as I do that, she pops up. She's on top of me. She has her shoulders, she has her knees pin my shoulders down. She's on top of me. Her hair is hanging down across her breast, and she's looking down at me. And she has a completely different face. It's just changed. And she looks down at me, and she says this in a completely different voice. All right, we're going to do this, but you need to understand 2 things. 1, I never want to see you again. 2, I want you to come inside of me. Now, nobody's ever said that to me before. It's usually not like a typical line on a first date. And she's on top of me, and she's grinding, getting me all excited, and I can't help it. I find myself getting a little excited. I just can't help it. So she takes my cock and just jams it inside of her, and then she just starts piston fucking me. Like an engine just revved up, just fucking going to town, just and I'm laying there like, oh, Jesus Christ, And after a couple minutes, I'm laying there, I'm like, slow down. But she's not interested in anything that I have to say, and she just keeps going. So a few minutes into it, I was like, I find myself getting close, and I try to do like the slip out, but she's having none of that, man, none of that. Takes my cock and just jams it right back inside her, and she's like, no, and just keeps piston fucking me. I'm laying there like, oh, Jesus. And then it's over. So when it's over, when I finish, she rolls back off and she goes back to like facing the wall. And I'm laying there in the bed like, oh God. It's like, what just happened? I'm still trying to process if I heard a demonic voice at the beginning. And I'm laying there like, oh Jesus. So like a few minutes of laying there, I don't know what came over me, but I just wanted like a little physical companionship, a little bit of comfort. And man, I make the mistake. I go in for a little cuddle. Big mistake. Because as soon as I do that, go in for a little spoon action, boom, she pops back up and does the exact same thing. Pins me down and says the exact same thing. Verbatim, like nothing had happened before. Says the exact same thing in the exact same voice. All right, we're going to do this, but you need to understand 2 things. 1, I never want to see you again. And you guys remember rule number 2. I'm just laying there, and this time I just let it happen. I don't even fight it, And she does the exact same thing, just pissing fucking me. I'm just laying there like, oh, Jesus, And this time when it's over, when it's all done, she does the same thing, rolls off, faces the wall. And I'm just laying there just trying to process. As I'm laying there, I make a terrible, terrible mistake. I fall asleep. So I wake up in the morning. When I wake up in the morning, rub my eyes, oh, and it all comes back to me. And I look over, and she's cuddled up next to me, all soft. And she's got a completely different face, like her eyes have changed. Everything has changed. She's cuddled up next to me, and she says, "Good morning." And this little kid, like a 6, 7-year-old voice. I'm like, oh, Jesus, shame just starts washing over me. And then she says, "Do you live with your mama?" I was like, oh no. I was like, no, I don't live with my mama. She's like, "Why don't you live with your mama?" It's like, because I grew up and I moved out of the house. She says, "Oh, I think everyone should live with their mama." I was like, oh, okay. And then there's a noise in the hallway. And I watch her face change. It goes from this soft little baby face to like something different. She gets serious. Her eyes change. She stands up. She starts getting dressed. And she walks out into the hallway, and at this point I sit up, just this icky, dirty feeling is washing over me and regret. And I start putting my clothes on, and I hear them arguing. It's her mother, and they're arguing in the hallway. And her mother's like, "What were you doing? You were going out to bars? You know how dangerous that is." And then they start arguing about her not taking her medication. I'm like, oh, Jesus. So I'm putting my shoes on, and her mother walks into the room. She's like, "Good morning." It's like, "Good morning." And then the mom opens has the door, and she's like, "Leave." So I walk out of the house, and I walk outside. And when I get outside, the sun is extremely bright that morning, vampire status. It's just like, Jesus. So I come to out of this PTSD daydream, and Kate's on top of me, her fists are just raining down on me. And I realized that, I actually deserve a little bit of this beating, I should have left. As soon as she said the 2 rules, I should have just left. I should have stood up like, nope, left. But I didn't, I stayed. So I deserved a little bit of that beating. But at the same time, I realized I still needed a face. You have to have a face in this life to interact with people. It really helps if you had a face, So I have to put a stop to it. So I grab her arms and I roll her over, and blood is dripping off my face down onto Kate, And I was like, "Are you done? Are you done?" And she kind of comes to, snaps out of her rage. So, I stand up, and she kind of gives me the nod like, "Yeah, I'm done." So I go to the bedroom, and I start packing up my clothes. I put them all into a basket, and then I grab my journal, and I grab all my fishing gear and everything, and then I call my brother. My brother, he lives half mile away or something. I was like, "Hey, man, can I come stay with you tonight? I had a bit of a rough night." And he's like, yeah, sure. So he comes and picks me up. So my brother, he comes and picks me up. I'm standing on the curb. He has one look at my face, and he's like, "Oh, shit." So I get in the car, and I tell him the whole story, and he starts laughing. He's got a bit of a sick sense of humor like I do. So I spend the night at my brother's place. So the next morning, I go to work, and the head chef, as soon as I go in, the head chef, he has one look at me, and he's like, "Yeah, you can have the day off, because you did not want someone who looked like me cooking your food. Remember, it's an exposed kitchen." It's like, you didn't, She's like, "No, go home." So I went home, I went to my brother's place, and I sat down on the couch, and I went over and I grabbed my journal. Figure it was time for a journal entry, And I was flipping through the pages, and it was like, Thatcher. And as soon as I got to a blank page, for the first time, I started with the word I. Because I realized if I was ever going to start making sense of like all the crazy shit that happens in this world, the first thing that I needed to do was start writing myself into my own stories.